My name is Karen Hoek. I'm Business Development Manager Fortinet for Exclusive Belgium. And welcome to our Fortinet Security Fabric whiteboard session. So I have drew already an internal network of a certain company. So we have the internet and we have our perimeter firewall, which is a Fortigate, a cluster of Fortigate. We have our internal network. We have the DMZ with FortiMail, whether it is a FortiMail appliance, a FortiMail VM in a data center, or FortiMail Cloud to protect Office 365 mail. And we have the FortiWeb to protect e-commerce sites, for instance. The internal network can also be a data center when we want to position Security Fabric at enterprise level. And we have our users, and this is Bob. So first of all, the Fortigate we want to position is a next generation firewall. So what is next generation firewall nowadays? It is the consolidation of different security technologies into one intelligent appliance. Why? Because security has become very complex. Hackers nowadays, they become very smart and use different technologies to penetrate the network. So we need to have a response to that in an affordable way. So that's why we will consolidate the different technologies in one appliance. So what are the functionalities of the Fortigate next generation firewall? First of all, we have antivirus or anti-malware, which is signature-based. And signature-based, that means it is very effective against known malware. We have our IPS database intrusion prevention system, also signature-based against known intrusions. We have URL filtering. So we can whitelist or blacklist the URLs or websites where our users want to go to. We have application control. So for instance, with the URL filter, we can allow or not allow Bob to go to a certain website, let us say Facebook. And with the application control, we can go into the application, into Facebook, and block Farmville, for instance, one of the games that you can play within Facebook. We also have our VPN functionality, of course, so we can set up site-to-site VPNs between different FortiGates, or we can have client-to-site VPN, so encrypted tunnels, of course, when Bob, for instance, wants to work remotely from home. And also very important functionality nowadays, and it comes free of charge. It is built within a standard functionality of Fortigate, is SD1. So we can have connectivity to applications in the cloud, for instance, connectivity between sites, so very good in multi-site environments, move to the cloud, but with the one connectivity, we can also set security policies. So that is really a unique feature of Fortinet, and it comes within the Fortigate, so very affordable. Fortigate can act also as a controller for FortiSwitch and FortiAP. I come to that later because we can integrate Switch and AP of Fortinet very good into the Fortinet Security Fabric. And an important functionality that comes also within the Fortigate, no additional license needed, is Ssl Inspection. As you might know, most of the websites nowadays are HTTPS. That means when we go to the website and request data, the data will be encrypted. And now more than 80% of all internet traffic is encrypted. So if we don't have a decent SSL inspection, so a decryption, and afterwards again an encryption, we miss like 80% of all the traffic that goes through the Fortigate. And as you might know, hackers are very smart of sending malware within our encrypted tunnels. But SSL inspection, it demands performance. Most of the firewall vendors, they use processors like Intel, and that Intel processor has to do all the work, all the handling of network inspection and content inspection. That means most of the users that, for instance, have a checkpoint firewall, they turn off the SSL inspection because otherwise they don't have performance. Or when they want to have SSL inspection in place, they need to have an appliance that is twice the cost as a Fortigate. And why? Because the Fortigate, they have their purpose-built processors. Fortinet has developed their own processor, and it goes like this. So we have our central CPU, and next to the CPU we have our network processor, and we have our content processor. So we can offload the work and the inspection the Fortigate has to do with all the incoming and outgoing data flows. Network processor, it inspects firewall, and it does VPN. Content processor, however, it will be used for our AV inspection, our IPS inspection, and SSL inspection. So we have really dedicated processor to do that content inspection. That means that we can have really good performance at an affordable price. And that is really a unique point of Fortinet. So we have our AV database at the Fortigate. We have our RV database, so signature-based, within our FortiMail, within the FortiWeb, and we have it also in the client installed at Bob's laptop. So like I said, AV, it is signature-based, so it is very good to detect, to identify known malware. But as cyber security and hackers, they become more and more smart, they use different techniques. That means they need to find ways and need to develop malware that is able to bypass our signature-based antivirus. So they're going to develop 0 days. 0 days are malware that is not identified by the Fortigate. It will pass through, and then Bob's laptop will become infected. So what is a 0 day? A 0 day comes in 3, let us say, flavors. So the first one are the very new 0 days. These are really for the smart hackers because they develop really new code aimed to attack a certain or a dedicated enterprise, dedicated company, or to attack a certain system. Really for smart hackers. But most of the hackers, they're a little bit lazy. So what are they going to do? They're going to get a really old malware that is not included in the signature-based limited database within our different solutions. Because it is limited, because if we want to use an extended database, then we don't have a good performance anymore. So the old variants, or the old 0 days, we're gonna call them vintage. It might be a 0 day, or it might be a malware, a known malware, of course. Of 10 years ago, they reuse it, it passes through the Fortigate, and Bob is infected again. And then a third 0 day is a variant. So the hacker's gonna modify a code of an existing malware And when the code is slightly modified, it becomes a 0-day. It's like going to the doctor for your flu vaccine. The flu vaccine, it has the variants of last year and maybe the year before of the flu. But when there's a whole new variant in the world, well, the vaccine doesn't work anymore and you become ill. So this is the same. Slightly modified, pass it through, infected. So next to our signature-based antivirus, anti-malware, we need to have another solution that can identify the behavior of 0 days. And we're going to use sandboxing technology. So we have our FortiSandbox integrated in the security fabric. We can have the FortiSandbox on-premise for large enterprises. We can have them in VM for data centers or maybe managed service providers. But we also have FortiSandbox in the cloud that is part of the UTM bundle that you can have with your Fortigate. Is part of the enterprise ATP bundle of the FortiMail. So you can have FortiSandbox in different variants. So how does sandboxing technology works and how does FortiSandbox will identify the 0-day? Well, it is in 5 steps. Step 1, it will check against an extreme database. So, how are we going to identify the packages to the FortiSandbox with the AV? Well, Bob is going to a certain website or a certain application within the cloud. And the request comes back. Fortigate will check the data flow against APS, AV, URL, and so on. And the data flow can come back to Bob. But we cannot stop that data flow to be inspected with the FortiSandbox, because otherwise Bob will go to his administrator, very mad, telling, yeah, I have a session interruption, I cannot work. So we're going to duplicate or deviate the data flow to the FortiSandbox. And then step 1 will occur. That data flow, that package, according to the policies, we can send all packages or certain packages to the sandbox. We're going to check it against an extreme database, signature-based database. So all the known malware where we already have a signature for will be checked. And if it has been identified, that package, as being a vintage, because then we can really find these vintage 0 days, then it will already stop after step 1 and we already have it identified a 0 day. Otherwise, we go to step 2, and this is an important one. The FortiSandbox will communicate with FortiGuard in the cloud. FortiGuard are the brains of Fortinet. It's really like the heart of Fortinet. It's where the threat intelligence relies. So Fortinet, they have a lab of more than 200 engineers scanning the internet on a daily basis, collecting all the logs of all the Fortinet devices throughout the world to see if they already can find new malware and new 0 days. So, and this is really important because then we can really talk about a global security fabric. First of all, Fortinet is part of the Global Threat Alliance. And the Global Threat Alliance is an alliance of different security vendors like Fortinet, Palo Alto, Cisco, Trend Micro, and so on. And they share security information. If one of the vendors, they have identified a 0 day, they will share that intelligence, that information with the other security vendors, so that FortiGuard can update all the databases throughout the world. Another really important thing about FortiGuard and about the sensors, because every sold Fortinet appliance acts as a sensor, is that Fortinet is number one in the number of appliances ever sold. That means they have sold more appliances than Palo Alto, Check Point and Cisco together, and have already sold more than 3 million appliances. One of 3 security appliances sold throughout the world is Fortinet. And they are all part of a global security fabric. So it's really huge, the integration. So FortiSandbox will do a cloud query and ask FortiGuard if that certain package has already been identified as malware or as suspicious throughout the world. So it can happen that a FortiSandbox in America has identified that same package already as being malware. A pre-signature has been sent from that FortiSandbox in America to FortiGuard, and FortiGuard can communicate with our FortiSandbox and send that pre-signature to the FortiSandbox saying, yes, it has been identified as malware. So the analysis will stop with step 2. But our FortiSandbox have found nothing, so we go to step 3, which is CPRL, Content Pattern Recognition Language. It is code emulation. What is the sandbox going to do? It is not yet executing the code, but interpreting the code of that package. The FortiSandbox will check. For instance, we have a PDF here that is being checked, and in the code it says, okay, that PDF will remain quiet until after 3 months and then it becomes active. A PDF is not allowed to do that. Or in the code it has been written that that package will contact a command and control server somewhere or a website with a certain malware. So we can really check the code on anomalies. And the CPRL is very good at detecting evasion techniques, code that is specifically written to avoid sandboxing technology. Because hackers, they're getting very smart and they use like codes when that certain package is executed in a VM. That's what a FortiSandbox also do. When it is executed, it becomes a clean package, clean code. So that's evasion technique. And CPRL is very good at detecting that. These first 3 steps can already identify 80% of all 0 days. And most of the times we don't have to go to step 4 and step 5. So these are really, really good techniques already in Sandbox. Also because it is OS independent. We can check nearly all packages that will be sent to the Sandbox. But after 30-40 seconds we have not found anything, so we're going to execute the code, execute the package in a VM. In a safe virtual machine, so we can really identify how the behavior of that code will work. And then we can check if that code will make like callbacks to a command and control server, callbacks to a website that is infected, and so on. These 2 extra steps take about 2 minutes to 5 minutes, depending on the complexity of the code that is being analyzed. When we have found something, when the FortiSandbox found malware, it will generate a report and will flag that malware as being high risk, medium risk, low risk, suspicious, and so on. And the Sandbox will create a pre-signature already. It's also called a hash. And that hash will be sent to the Fortigate. So with that hash, with that pre-signature, the Fortigate can update the antivirus database, IPS database, and URL filter, and so on. So we can already have a certain level of protection before the real signature has been developed by FortiGuard. Because, it can take up till 24 hours until a real signature has been made. So, of course, FortiSandbox will send that pre-signature to FortiGuard as well. We're going to send that pre-signature to FortiMail. And there is something really good about the integration of FortiMail. So please position FortiMail as well to your customers. As I have said that we cannot interrupt a data flow coming from the internet through the Fortigate to Bob's laptop in order to inspect by the FortiSandbox. FortiMail use store and forward techniques. So that means that when a mail comes in, we can inspect the URL, the attachments, all active content of the mail by the FortiSandbox. And that means we can store the mail. We will not deliver the mail already to Bob, but store the mail to be inspected. If the mail is safe, then the mail will be delivered to Bob. Is the mail not safe, then the mail will not be delivered, but nothing will be sent to Bob's laptop. So this is really important to have the integration with FortiMail as well, because 70% of all malware and of all 0 days will be sent by email. So this is a really, really important part. And of course, the information, the pre-signature will be sent to the FortiClient database, the AV database of the FortiClient on Bob's laptop. So, what are the other functionalities of FortiClient? Because you can say, well, FortiClient is like another endpoint protection, and we have our Trend Micro or our Symantec. Well, FortiClient, it is like another endpoint protection, but it becomes intelligent when integrated into the security fabric. Because with the integration of FortiClient and Fortigate, we can easily block Bob's laptop or block the malware that has come through the Fortigate, inspected by the sandbox. So we have really an automated response to quarantine a laptop, an IP address, and so on. So the FortiClient also has the AV database, also a URL filter, but also patch management. So we can make sure that Bob's laptop has all the latest updates of all software installed at his laptop. And we can also automate by saying if he doesn't have the latest software updates, well, Bob cannot go through the Fortigate to the internet. So again, FortiClient, as part of the security fabric, we can set automated policies. Also, we can have our VPN set up when Bob is working remotely from home. He can have that secure tunnel towards the Fortigate to be able to access his data on the network. And from the FortiOS 6.2, this is really important, it has a direct integration also with FortiSandbox in the cloud. So you can have that extended protection against 0 days. So FortiSandbox integration. So as I said already, is that you can have FortiSandbox on premise, but it's also part of UTM bundle from the Fortigate. But if you have the FortiClient within FortiOS 6.2, you also have FortiSandbox Cloud integrated directly. So that means it can communicate with FortiSandbox in the cloud. Another way of communication when Bob is working from an airport, for instance, is that the FortiClient will communicate every time with FortiGuard directly to have the latest signatures for the AV database, to have the latest updates on our URL filtering, and to have the latest patches also. So this is really important to have FortiClient also integrated in the security fabric. And we can go even further, because as I have said, Fortigate can act as a controller for FortiSwitch and FortiAP. We can have an extra layer of protection on layer 2. So if we add our FortiSwitch and our FortiAP, then we have that extra level of protection. So that means, well, a switch is a switch, of course. A FortiSwitch is also like a normal switch, but integrated into the security fabric. We can even block certain ports on layer 2. Then malware or 0 days found on Bob's laptop in like a VLAN of sales. We can say, okay, we don't want that other VLANs, back office teams, a pre-sales team and so on, who has different ports on the switches. We don't want that the malware will spread laterally in the network. We can block the ports. Or we can block Bob's IP address connecting to our FortiAP within a network. So these are really, really good components to have network security in place. And then last but not least, of course, we need to have a way to have an advanced visibility of what's happening in the network. So we can use FortiAnalyzer for bigger environments, or alternatively, for the SMB market, we can work with FortiCloud at customer premise, and even within managed services, we can have FortiCloud multi-tenant license if our partners want to do security, managed security services to their customers. So what does the FortiAnalyzer do? It will collect all the logs of the Fortinet solutions within our local security fabric. So it will collect the logs of our FortiGates. It will collect the logs of our FortiWeb when we have it installed, of FortiMail, FortiSandbox, and FortiClient. And these logs will be collected and correlated to see what happens on the networks, to raise an alert and send that alert back to the Fortigate. So again, when a malware has been identified, the Fortigate can automatically quarantine a certain laptop, a certain IP address. So visibility can also be used like a SOC device, security operations center, where we can really in international companies see what happens in a certain region and so on. But a really important license, an additional license that we can have on our FortiAnalyzer, or on the Fortigate when we combine Fortigate with FortiCloud, for instance, is the indicators of compromise. The indicators of compromise is an additional license. It's a necessary license to be compliant for GDPR, for instance, because it will raise the visibility even more on what happens on the network. So, how does indicators of compromise work? Let us say that Bob, yesterday, he went to his banking website. So he did a request through the Fortigate. Fortigate said, yeah, you're allowed to go to your banking website. So the request comes back and Bob is on the website. Well, today, there has been a pre-signature or a signature that certain URL, that certain website is identified as phishing website. So that means that our URL database has been updated. An AV signature has been updated in the database because malware has found on that website. So all these databases are updated. The indicators of compromise will check all the logs of the last 7 days, and of course Bob going to his banking website is logged also. So it will check all the logs against the new updates in our databases. So we can now generate, or FortiAnalyzer can now generate an alert saying, Bob went to his banking website yesterday, now updated as phishing website, so it is possible that Bob is infected. So there might be an indicator of compromise. And again, what we can do is send that alert to the Fortigate, and Fortigate can either block a port or quarantine Lob's laptop from the internet again, until we have resolved the security issue. So that is how the Fortinet Security Fabric works. Thank you very much.